Hello and welcome back to Paranormal NL Podcast, Season 2, Episode 152. I'm your host, Jen. Tonight, since so many people have drone fever, I thought I'd give you a special bonus Christmas Drone X-Files to add to your festive Christmas season. PNL Podcast is sponsored by the BOG team. It's a boots on the ground team doing local historical investigations in Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada. Let's give a shout out to the BOG team digital music in the background, created by Robert Dumont. Now, Robert is also on the BOG team, and he also does the official logos and merch that you can find on TeePublic. Check him out on Season 1, Episode 28 with his Devil's Toy Box. That's a 2-part radio episode, and follow him on IMDb. Tonight's special Christmas guest is backstage, and I'll bring him on the stage and introduce him shortly. He's also a PNL Podcast Alumni-Member, and our special guest tonight was on Season 1, Episode 3, and talked about giants, cryptids, vampires, and he came back again in Season 1, Episode 25 with Christmas X-files, and then again in Season 2, Episode 45 with Easter X-files back in 2024 of Easter this year. Now it's time to pull up your cozy chair, grab your favorite cold one, and listen in to Paranormal NL Podcast. It's a place where the people of Newfoundland and Labrador, Canada, and anywhere else in the world can share their paranormal experiences. PNL Podcast also believes in supporting people, places, and things to promote paranormal tourism and paranormal networking all over the globe. A big thank you again to all the PNL Podcast alumni guests from Season 1 and 2, and of course our fans. We want to hear your stories. Do you have any paranormal, UFO, esoteric, metaphysical, cryptid creatures, folklore, historical, books, or just tales of the weird you'd like to share as a guest on my PNL Podcast? Reach out to me on Facebook, Instagram, or Gmail at paranormal.nl.podcast@gmail.com. And remember, after your episode, you'll become part of the PNL Podcast Alumni Network. And make sure you click on the bell, like, share, and subscribe to follow along on whatever platform you're listening in on to get updates for new episodes. And head on over to Facebook and join our group. It's the Paranormal NL Podcast and BOG Team group. It's the official place to hang out in a fun and safe space and find upcoming new episodes in the featured section of the group. Now, let's get on with the show. Tonight, I have with me Dr. Judd Burton. Welcome, Dr. Burton.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Yes, it's great to have you here. So, Dr. Judd Burton, he's from South Texas. How's the weather down in Texas?
Well, right now I'm in Plano, Texas, which is in the Dallas area, and it's in the 40s Fahrenheit.
Oh,
down
nice.
in Texas.
You know, this is our first green Christmas in I don't know how long. And a big Merry Christmas to you, by the way.
Oh, Merry Christmas to you. I bet it has been a while since you've had a green Christmas.
Oh, ages. Here in Newfoundland and Labrador, we don't often get them, and I'm loving it. I got you a Christmas stocking. Let's see what's in it. Ooh, it's a crystal. Cool. Another crystal. And, what is it? Oh, we've got some other stuff in here. I don't know if that's going to ward off all the drones, though. Have you been seeing many things down in Texas?
I've got a few friends here who say that they've seen some of the drones, but of course most of the activity is in New Jersey and New York.
New Jersey, yes, indeed. But you know what? We got people all over the globe seeing stuff. Even here in Newfoundland and Labrador, I've got a little group going, and we've got people sending in videos and pictures, all kinds of stuff. If you have any, please comment in the comment section, send your pictures. We want to see what the heck is going on all over the world. I know that the last time myself and you were doing UFO stuff, we got to give a shout out to Noe Torres in Edinburgh, Texas, over there at the Edinburgh UFO Festival. He was there.
Oh yeah, definitely shout out to Noe Torres, one of probably, well, not probably, he is definitely one of Texas and indeed the entire UFO community's foremost researchers. Yeah, we had a good time at those conferences. They had great guests.
Yes,
George
we got
Norrie.
yeah, go ahead. We got to hobnob with a lot of people, right?
Yeah, George Norrie from Coast to Coast, and David Hatcher Childress.
I love Childress. Yeah, he's awesome. I love his books. I love George. Thank you so much for all you do on Coast to Coast.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I'm not saying it's aliens, but I don't know. It might be aliens. Yeah, we've seen a lot of people, a lot of good folks over there. So tell us a little bit more about yourself for the people listening all over the world who don't know who Dr. Judd Burton is. He has Burton Beyond. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or you want to wait until? Yeah, tell us about your accolades. Your alphabet.
I'm a historian of religion primarily. I have a PhD in history from Texas Tech University and a master's degree in anthropology and history from Texas Tech as well. For much of my career, I was a conventional academic, but I felt the need to transition into more independent scholarship and just devoting more time to research. And I still teach. In fact, the Institute of Biblical Anthropology is the school that I direct. Yeah, and I offer all kinds of it's biblical coursework, but it factors in the unorthodox. I have described it in the past as Sunday school meets the X-files.
Yeah, because you've got everything. You've got demonology, biblical anthropology. You've got the preternatural morphology, the world mythology, ancient Near East and Mediterranean civilizations. And you're an expert also in paraethnology, like archaeology, biblical, folklore, history, anything to do with anything ancient, Roman, Grecian, you name it, you know about it. I mean, not only do you teach and have you teached at multiple university levels, you've done research, speaking engagements. I mean, tell us more about some of the research you've done.
Well, most people know my research in the field of biblical giants. I've written a number of works on those, including Interview with the Giant and the Nephilim Dossier. And the kind of the way that I got into that was through my research of a site called Paneas, which I helped excavate a phase of early on in my college career. And then when I got into my doctoral studies, I revisited the idea of doing a religious history on the site. And it's an interesting site on the southwestern slope of Mount Hermon in Israel, and a lot of people will be familiar with that mountain because of its association with the fallen angels and the giants.
Right. And a lot of people, when they think about giants, they think about the movie Aliens. And what was the movie that was made later after Aliens that was kind of like a prequel to it? And there were giants.
Prometheus. Yeah, the engineers in that movie were sort of the analogs for the Watchers and the Nephilim.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of all interrelated in a way. I mean, Christmas itself is kind of supernatural, but tell us more about the giants and things.
Well, as I was saying, it was this site, Paneas, known today as Banias, that got me interested in all of it to begin with. And I should say that recently I've been vindicated about a particular phase of its archaeology. I was sort of in the minority about the location of a particular temple. at the site. And speaking of shout outs, I should give shout outs to the archaeologists who've done the most recent work that vindicated my position in my dissertation, Addie Ehrlich and Ron Lavey, in Israel.
Yes, because you've been there. You've been to Israel. You've been to a lot of places there.
Certainly, and they vindicated my theory that this temple to Augustus was not in front of the cave of Pan. We're still looking for that temple, but now we know for certain that it was not in front of the cave, and so that made me feel pretty good. But because for the longest time, I was in the minority of scholars who thought that this temple was not in front of the cave. But I say all that to say that my investment in the history of that region, and indeed in the supernatural history of that region, has been long-standing.
Well, a lot of the Bible is actually, people think, oh, it's all, is it true? Is it supernatural? Well, yeah, it's supernatural, but there's other stuff in there. Like, they've actually used the Bible to find places. That's what archaeologists do, right? That's why you look in Banias.
Certainly. Well, and I mean, it's not just the material evidence that corroborates the historicity of the Bible, but it's the text, the document evidence that we have, the historical evidence. Look at it this way. We have about 8 sources for the existence of Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, right? So you've got people like Roman historians like Tacitus and Suetonius who are writing about him. But he also wrote an autobiography. But by way of comparison, we have close to 40 historical sources for Jesus. And nobody questions that Caesar Augustus existed. And yet there's still a debate to this day about the historical Jesus. But for instance, we all not even the sources that reference him in the Bible, like the Gospels and the letters, but historians like Flavius Josephus, and who was a Galilean, in fact. He came from Jesus's neighborhood, basically. We've got
your PhD was in early Christianity and Greco-Roman religions. If anybody wants to know anything about the Bible, then you know a lot about it. And you're also ordained, aren't you?
I am. Do you have a ministerial ordination? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, jack of all trades. And you teach it all with the IBA, the Institute of Biblical Anthropology. And, when we went to the Alien Festival, you brought along, you wrote up the Shepherds Sling, a brief guide to biblical giants. And as we were saying, some people might think, oh, well, are giants aliens? Because of the Prometheus that we were talking about?
Well, by definition, even in the context of biblical theology, by definition, the watcher angels that were the progenitors of the giants, when they mated with human females, you could think of them as alien. They're certainly extraterrestrial. They're not of the earth. They're not from the earth. They're technically from another dimension. So in that regard, they are alien. Their descendants, their offspring, would have been hybrids of a sort, because they would have both angelic pedigree and human pedigree.
Yeah, so they had a little bit of both. Now, and that's, part of it, them being giants, is, tell us a little bit more about them. They weren't very friendly now, were they?
No, they were horrendous, in fact. Probably our best source in terms of commentary on their behavior outside of the Bible is the apocryphal Book of Enoch.
Tell us about
which was part of the Second Temple period, from about 400 BC into the first century AD. sometimes called the intertestamental period. Well, it just so happens that certain Jewish communities, particularly the Essenes, were writing a lot about what we would dub the paranormal. They were writing a lot about demons and angels and fallen angels and all the ranks and behaviors of these entities that they collectively called Elohim. But Enoch tells us, gives us kind of the expanded narrative of Genesis, and we learn that these giant offspring of watchers and human females were terrible. They ate up all of humanity's resources, and then they started to eat people and drink blood, and they warred against humanity, and then they turned on each other and started doing the same thing, almost to the point to where Enoch in one passage describes that the watcher angels themselves became afraid of them. And this is all part of the story leading into the great deluge, the flood, the Noahic flood, because things got so unruly and horrible and out of hand that God became displeased with the way things were going on earth. So yeah, they were terrible, and the way that this all ties back into demonology is because the judgment that's handed down to the Watchers and the Nephilim is that the Watchers were to be thrown into a subterranean prison. The analog here would be like the Greek Tartarus, where the Titans were imprisoned, and the Nephilim, their bodies were to be destroyed in the flood, but their spirits would continue. Enoch even says that there'll be unclean spirits on the earth, and that they would placate humanity and hamper humanity and seek to indwell them. And this is the origin of demons, these lower order Elohim. And in fact, when you go to the New Testament,
I've got something here that I'm throwing up on a Spirit Talker that came up. Archangel. I've never had that come up before, and I was in this place called the Grotto in Flat Rock over here, and it's where Pope John Paul came over and blessed our fleets, and he also was over in the Grotto and did some prayers over there. And we got some really wicked stuff on SLS that I'll bring up soon, but please continue about what you were talking about with the giants and the demons and angels.
Yeah, well, I was talking about the origin of demons, these being the disembodied spirits of the Nephilim. And so that's why when a person is demon possessed, they exhibit enormous strength. That's one of the characteristics, and they often exhibit knowledge, including languages that person has never been trained in. That's because these entities have been around for millennia.
It's interesting you say that, because one of the other things I got on there was I've been here 1,000 years, it said. I thought that was weird. I thought that sounds ancient.
Yeah, well, it could be that particular entity has been there for that long.
I've got something here I can pull up just for the people to watch. Let me go ahead and pull it up and add it to the stage. Here's the wind. It was you see how tall those things are?
Yes.
Look how tall that is. That is as tall as the actual grotto. And that grotto is very, very many stairs to get up there.
And that's over, you said that's in near Flat Rock?
Yes, yeah, that is the grotto, the Lady of Lords. Look how tall that is. And now, as the camera pans over, there's an archangel. There's a cross up there, up on the very
Hmm.
top up here. There's see another one. See behind him, there's an archangel.
Hmm.
I'm gonna pull that
Hi,
off.
Taylor. You're on.
I'm gonna pull that off stage now.
Hmm.
So, what do you think about that?
That's interesting. I'd have to scrutinize it a little more before I came to any sort of conclusion.
Very well, I was just thought it was strange that like an archangel, you were talking about giants, and of course giants
Mhm.
are literally angels.
Well, they have angelic pedigree. They certainly would have angelic DNA.
So you can have
Um,
bad angels and good angels, right? I mean, that's what these giants
Yeah.
were, basically.
Well, angel is the word in Hebrew is melech, and in Greek in the New Testament it's angelos. They mean the same thing, messenger. So it's it's
Okay.
a job title, but the actual taxonomy of the heavenly
actual-
host, yeah, is quite diverse. There are all kinds of like cherubim and seraphim that are the throne guardians of Yahweh. And then you have watcher angels. You have, there's probably a taxonomy that we only know, the things that are articulated in the Bible, for instance, and the apocryphal literature. It's probably more expansive and more diverse than we could possibly imagine. And of course, these are agents of free will, so they could choose to stay loyal to God or rebel, and obviously some of them did rebel, and there were tremendous consequences for humanity.
So, I mean, there's a lot of conspiracy theories going around about these drones. I know a lot of people have their ideas of what's going on, and we don't want to make the show political, but I don't know if you want to say anything about what your theory is.
Well, I mean, just
go on.
it does seem strange, like the timing of it all. It seems to me like it's a kind of a false flag, quite honestly. I think it's
Look over here while we're doing this.
yeah, exactly. It's a distraction. That's exactly it. Yeah. It's really bizarre that almost 100 years ago, the old Mercury Theater that Orson Welles was in charge, the actor Orson Welles, they used to adapt these old novels into radio plays, like Dracula and The Count of Monte Cristo. Well, they did H.G. Wells'
The War of the Worlds.
War of the Worlds.
Do you know I had that on a record player that somebody threw in a river and we found it?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I love those old radio plays. But anyway, they resituated in New Jersey, which is where all of these drones are being sighted. And everybody, when that was broadcast, it was like a news, like a journalistic piece. And so everybody thought that we were really under an invasion. Or I say everybody, the local population thought that we were under invasion. I mean, there were people that were shooting at the water towers with their shotguns.
True, right? And now we got people
yeah.
shooting at the drones.
Now we've got, now we're almost 100 years later, and the same sort of thing is happening. Historical irony or something else? I tend to think something else.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, like, what is going on?
Mm-hmm. Certainly. So that's my take. My gut tells me that it's a false flag, that it's a distraction. It's meant to take our attention off of something bigger and perhaps more nefarious that's in the works.
Yeah. There's I tell you, there's a lot more in the world than than those things. And tell
Yes,
us
it's
more about, like, back to the Christmas stuff. I know that you want to talk a little bit more about the Christmas season, and I know we had wanted to keep this episode to a 30-minute episode, but when you talk to Dr. Judd Burton, he's very knowledgeable. It's kind of hard to keep it down to 30 minutes.
well, yeah. Here we are at the Christmas season. That's why I intoned the historical sources for Jesus, and it's funny how even the nativity season seems to be a matter of debate amongst different groups within Christianity. But it's pretty clear that even from, Jesus probably wasn't born in December. In fact, he was probably born in September. But the fact of the matter is that even if he was born in September, that means that he was still conceived probably around December. And in fact, we have record even in the Gospels of Jesus attending the Feast of Dedication of the temple, which is in December. And most people would be familiar with the Feast of Lights, Hanukkah, which was instituted during the Second Temple period and is often associated with Jesus. But it's very clear, even in early church records, that the early church fathers were writing, that there was a nativity celebration in the winter that took place in early Christian communities. And there's this misconception that the Christmas festival was finally instituted by Constantine during the Council of Nicaea. And unfortunately, this sort of Da Vinci Code approach to Christmas doesn't yield much of anything of historical value.
Here I am with all this ridiculous stuff on my head and everything, when it should be all about this, right? All about.
Well, you've got a Santa hat on, right? So let's talk about Saint Nick.
Yeah. Okay.
Nicholas was an actual person. He was a bishop of Myra in Asia Minor, modern Turkey. And we also know that Nicholas was at the Council of Nicaea. He was one of the bishops that helped to formalize Orthodoxy. And he became the one of the patron saints of children because of these stories that are residue of his legacy of being kind to children. So Santa Claus, or Saint Nicholas, was actually a real person.
I don't think a lot of people know that, right, John? I mean, do you have a lot of students who get surprised when you mention that?
Well, sometimes when we get to the church history segments of my classes, but often the modern image of Santa Claus comes with a lot of trappings that were borrowed from sort of northern and western European folklore. But the original Saint Nicholas was a bishop in the Eastern Church.
And what do you think about who's a bishop in the Eastern Church? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to say, when you tie it back to Christmas and Saint Nick, and what do you think about the light that was there? The Star of Bethlehem. Some people will go back and say, well, maybe that was just 3 stars that were merged into one, or it was.
Well, I think I mean, what makes it supernatural is the end result. I mean, even if even if we're looking at a conjunction of, Jupiter and Saturn, or Jupiter and Venus and the star Regulus, I think was one of the stars that's up for grabs. You've got this group of scholars, basically, in the Babylonian court, that had existed for arguably centuries up to that point, because Daniel, we track back to the book of Daniel in the Old Testament, who is in Babylon. He becomes one of these magi, along with his compatriots, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They basically get a PhD education in Mesopotamian literature and politics, and they become part of this group known as the Magi, these learned men. And my theory is that the entire reason that the Magi at the time of Jesus' birth knew to look for a coming Messiah is because Daniel brought those traditions during the Babylonian captivity. He was in Babylon, not only in Babylon, and so they knew about the Jewish prophecies of the coming Messiah. And so they were using what they would have regarded as, if Jupiter was in fact part of this conjunction that they were following, they saw this was the king star. Do you know what they called Jupiter in Babylonian astrology?
Tell me.
Nibiru.
No, okay, because I was going to talk to you about Nibiru and Planet X,
Yes, this was the Babylonian designation for Jupiter. They called it Marduk's star. Marduk would have been the Babylonian equivalent to Jupiter.
Yes, a lot of people call it Marduk. Mm-hmm. And it's an elliptical planet, they say, that is on an elliptical orbit around our galaxy.
Again, if you believe that Sitchin's translations are accurate, I don't think that they were, because it's a pretty big blunder to say that this was Planet X. But you can go on. In fact, I have posted in the past links to the Oxford Sumerian Akkadian glossary. Anybody can go online and type in the variants of Nibiru or any of its variants, and you'll get the definition, and it's always either Jupiter or Marduk star. But the reason I bring that up is because they're using part of their mystical tradition to find the star, and on their minds while they're doing it are these Jewish prophecies that have been part of their schooling since Daniel and his Jewish compatriots had been part of the Magi tradition.
Now, you've got several books.
They make their way. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask you about the Nephilim in regards to the planet. In your dossier, the Nephilim Dossier, do you talk about the planet in relation to them, or?
No, I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any direct connection. I mean, I don't really subscribe to much of what Sitchin had to say about Nibiru, just because I think his translations were off.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that there isn't a rogue planet, because we can only look at so much of the sky at any one time. That doesn't mean that there's not some sort of rogue planet. I mean, we find things in our own solar system, that catch us by surprise all the time. So that's not to say that it's not out there. I just don't believe that there's enough evidence to support Sitchin's version of a rogue planet. But having said that, if you look at the mythology that Sitchin uses to draw off of, the Anunnaki and the Apkallu, in particular, would be analogs for things like the Watchers and the Nephilim in the Old Testament tradition, the apocryphal tradition. So like the Apkallu, the people that are rather the gods, the entities that taught humanity how to farm and build cities and weapons and stuff like that. The analog in Jewish tradition would be these watcher angels, the egregori, these fallen angels that
The fallen angels, yeah.
Mhm.
That's what I was wondering about over at the grotto, right? Okay, it said archangel, but I didn't tell you, but at the gate, there's 2 gates there. I'll post a picture afterwards of the gates. They're huge and they're
Mhm.
iron, and it was a little bit windy, but not windy enough to blow a huge, big ass iron gate, open it, and slam it shut. One of the gates,
Mhm.
not 2, not both of them, one of them. Like, and then it said archangel, and then these big giant things were running around on the outside. So it was just a slew of different things that were happening that scared all 3 of us, and we all took off. But yeah, we were like, "Yeah, okay, we're out of here." We were like, "Okay." It's
Very
almost like
bizarre.
it wanted us to leave, but this happened when we pulled up. It said the gates are open. I thought it just meant I was looking back on it. I thought, that sounds kind of fishy. Like, I thought maybe the gates were open because the lanterns were lit, because there was a bunch of lanterns that people lit in remembrance for people. And I thought
Mhm.
maybe praying had opened a portal or something. But no, thinking back on it, I think they wanted the people to leave and they don't want to be disturbed and they wanted the gates closed. That's why
Mhm.
something slammed the gate shut. And then it said, the next day we went back, it said Archangel, but that night it didn't say Archangel. But we thought, okay, must be some kind of something big floating around. But in your Paranormal Big Country book, I'm pulling up some of your books here on the screen on Lulu. Shout out to Lulu, where you get all
Mhm.
your produced there.
Mhm.
Is there any mention of kind of UFO-y stuff in that book?
Oh, certainly. Yeah, that the Paranormal Big Country is kind of a supernatural history of the region of Texas that I grew up in. Um, and there are abundant UFO sightings. Um, Even in my hometown of Merkel, there's a record. In fact, one of the most famous UFO cases in Texas, the Aurora airship, actually made a stop in Merkel in 1897.
Hmm.
It's well documented in the newspapers of the day, and Whitley Strieber references it in his book Communion. Um, but there was it looked like a dirigible airship that made it, and this was in an era before those were common. Um, but it made its way across Texas from, if I'm remembering correctly, from about the Midland area all the way to Aurora, which is in the Dallas area. Um, and along that trajectory, it made a stop in Merkel. Um, but the tale behind it is very bizarre. Um, it was dragging something on the ground, like a kind of anchor or something,
That's weird.
and it stopped in Merkel about noon when everybody was getting out of church, and so there were a lot of people that saw this thing. And the sources say that a man in a blue jumpsuit, a diminutive small man, climbed down this rope, cut the line to the anchor, and then climbed back up the rope, and the ship went on its way to the east.
Hmm.
And that anchor or whatever it was displayed in the blacksmith shop close to the railroad tracks for a long time.
What
Um,
was it? Was it a chain or did you
it
get to
was
see it?
just no, I've never seen it, but I did meet the people that actually owned the property that old blacksmith shop was on. It had since been taken down. The only thing that was left were the foundations.
Right.
But that's about as close as I ever got to finding the anchor in Merkel. But it's something that I've always sort of keep my eye out for.
Interesting. Any
It's
other?
probably in somebody's trunk in their attic somewhere.
Any other Texas things you can think of besides, of course, Noe Torres, the other author in Texas who talks about UFOs? Is there anything else in the Paranormal Big Country book about UFO type stuff or aliens?
Oh, certainly. There are one of the other interesting sightings that I included in the book was one that was actually made by an archaeologist who was doing survey work south of Merkel. I can't remember the firm that he was working for, but somebody who's used to doing scientific recording actually mentioning this in one of his archaeological reports, I thought was pretty significant.
Yeah, for somebody to do that, for sure.
And on the edge of the big country is a town called Stephenville. I didn't mention it in that volume, but
we have a Stephenville here in Newfoundland and Labrador.
Well, there you go. Well, in Stephenville, Texas, there was a sighting of a large triangular UFO, almost in the vein of what we saw in the Phoenix lights. And of course, there are many other sightings of these triangular shaped UFOs.
I was going to say that's a popular shape.
Yeah, I think it was about 2000. I want to say about 2015, 16, 17, somewhere in there. There was when this thing was sighted in Stephenville.
Because the shapes that people are seeing now are more circular and tic-tac shapes, and we've got tic-tac shapes.
Tic-tac,
I've had some people send me shapes of items that look metallic, kind of bluey orbly, white tic-tacs, interesting stuff. And of course, the ones we're talking about in the Paranormal Big Country, there were the triangle ones.
Mm-hmm.
So if I go back to your books here, because I know we're going over your 13-minute mark that you wanted to stick to, but if I go back, we can talk a little bit about where to find you and your work and your books. We've got Interview with a Giant. We talked a little bit here about Paranormal Big Country. Then there's Paneas, right? The Religion of Ancient City of Pan.
Right.
The Nephilim Dossier. What about this one? The Lives of Necromancers.
Oh, yeah. Included in my catalog are some works by
The History of Magic and the Occult.
Yes, this is a book by William Godwin that I edited. William Godwin was Mary Shelley's father, the author of Frankenstein. And Godwin wrote what I think is one of the best and most digestible histories of magic. And so I thought that it would be a valuable book to preserve and to offer to my students. In fact, I use it in one of my classes in the Preternatural Morphology program.
Yeah, you have a lot of different classes. We can go back and look at those too. And here's another one, edited, Taboo, Magic, and Spirits.
Yes, this is a valuable work because it represents a phenomenon in classic studies that I think moved it forward, progressed it forward in a very meaningful way. At the beginning of the 20th century, you've got a lot of classical scholars who are beginning to use anthropology to better understand what's going on in the ancient world. And this book and others like it, like Ward Fowler's books on Roman history, which I would also at some point like to do an edited volume of, represent some strides forward in the study of Roman religion in particular, because most people think that the Roman gods are just exact analogs for the Greek gods, but that's not exactly true, because most of what the Roman called the noumena, collectively their gods, didn't really have personalities. In other words, they weren't anthropomorphic originally like the Greek gods were. They weren't human-like in form. They didn't have personalities. They were more like forces of nature or aspects of the home, that sort of thing. It's not until the Romans have contact with the Greeks, beginning in the 600s and the 500s, when the Greeks established colonies in southern Italy, that they begin to impact the religious consciousness of the Roman people. So, yeah, books like Taboo Magic and Spirits are interesting reads. That's one of the shorter and more digestible works of that period.
Yeah, you have a lot of different books. I know I was scrolling through as you were talking, just putting up some pictures there for people to look at there.
Sure.
The Book of Werewolves, it's another one
Oh,
that was edited.
that is an excellent one, and it's another one that I use for my classes. I've
I
got
think,
a class on werewolves in the Preternatural Morphology program. There's an
yes,
interesting story behind that book. The author, and it's still one of, along with Montague Summers' work on werewolves, it stands the test of time. It's one of the best books on the subject.
do you want
But
to give a
Savvy,
shout out to Blurry Creatures, since I think you talked a little bit about werewolves on their show too?
extensively, yes. A shout out to Nate and Luke at Blurry Creatures. They've been really good to me. They've taken me into their fold and made me one of their own, and it's just been, yeah, I love those guys and I love the community over there too.
Yeah.
But I wanted to say a couple of things about Sabine Baringgold, the author of the Book of Werewolves. He was a minister and an ethnologist, and he himself had an experience that he talks about at the beginning of the book with a werewolf. And so he's looking at this stuff through the lens of demonology, through the lens of the Bible. And it would probably interest people to know, if people are familiar with the old Christian hymn, Onward Christian Soldiers.
Yes.
That was written by the author of this book, Sabine Baringgold. So not only did he write Onward Christian Soldiers, he wrote the definitive book on werewolves.
Strange, right? Who would have put two together?
And yet there it is.
Voila. And then we've got all kinds of stuff. Bible, book by book. If since it's Christmas and you want to read about the Bible, here's an online study guide that he has.
Yeah.
And let's see. Of course, we want to go back to the IBA and look at that too. And then, of course, Greece and Rome. We know that's your specialty.
Yes, and I also teach a program on Mediterranean civilization where we cover Greek and Roman civilization. The Greeks we take all the way back to the Mycenaeans and the Minoans, and then we look at the archaic and classical Greeks, and then we look at the Roman kingship and the Roman Republic, and of course the Roman Empire.
Now, in regards to giants, I know that you've seen some of their skulls and stuff like that. You're pretty much a specialist when it comes to giants. Did you want to give a shout out to your giant work?
Yeah, probably the three works that most people know me for in terms of giant work is, well, in particular, Interview with the Giant, but the Shepherds Sling is kind of an introductory work for people who aren't familiar with the topic. It's very easily read, digestible. It's a short little book. But Interview with the Giant.
Didn't we produce that one over at the Alien Festival?
I think that was the first time that I sold it commercially.
Yeah, I remember that.
I had sold it at a couple of conferences before there, but Noe was gracious enough to give me a table at that conference. I want to say that was maybe 2015 or thereabouts.
Ish, right?
Yeah, ish, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'll go back. I'll let you give a shout out here to the IBA. I'm going to take this off screen. And yeah, you've got a lot of other books and articles that you've written. I mean, it's not just novels that you write. Give a shout out to some of your other work that you do. I'll take this one off and I'll put the Institute on.
Yeah, I mean, again, if people are interested in my work, they can go to burtonbeyond.net. For right now, that's the home of the IBA to the Institute of Biblical Anthropology. All you got to do is add to the address burtonbeyond.net /IBA, and then it'll take you to the IBA.
Yeah, so you
I'm
got
working on another website strictly for the IBA, but most of my research endeavors and my teaching endeavors these days are done through the Institute.
So is there any one course in particular that you recommend folks, or that you have most interest in?
Well, of course I'm interested in all of them, but I'll tell you right now, the most popular one by far is the Preternatural Morphology class. That's my buddy Derek.
Vampires, werewolves.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. My buddy Derek Gilbert affectionately calls it Monsters 101.
There you go. That's what you need when the aliens come. You need to know about the Monsters 101.
Well, and it's not just, I mean, you get the folklore, you get the mythology, but it's also looking at these things through the lens of the Bible. So looking at their kinds of demonic roots. So we were talking about werewolves a second ago, right?
Right.
Well,
yeah.
my theory is that those kinds of monsters, if you will, creatures, stem from the pre-flood world. They stem from the kind of genetic tampering that the Watchers did with the animals. Everything that they quote unquote created was hybrid in nature. Even their offspring, they were angelic and gigantic. They were angelic and human. And then you've got a whole
Well, it is
race.
interesting, in Egypt, where do you have them pictures of the DNA stuff? What do you think about that? With the, I guess you would call them the Nephilim.
Well, the Egyptians had their own races of giants. I want to say they were called the Neter, if I'm remembering that correctly. But there are a lot of Egyptian deities that are theriomorphic, that have animal attributes, and they also have human attributes.
Right, the chimeric.
They are chimeric, exactly. So I think a similar sort of thing is at play, and those spirits can manifest like that in different cultures along different cultural parameters. So you might have the Manitou, amongst the Algonquin speaking Indians in North America, or you might have the loup-garou in medieval France, the werewolf. They appear typically along culturally prescribed lines.
Yes, there are all kinds of different things
Mm-hmm.
in the Bible, like we say, that is supernatural, all kinds of different stuff. But the vampires and werewolves, this is your most popular one. And then we've got the world mythology, ancient Near East, Mediterranean. Do you want to give a shout out to any of your other courses or any Christmas specials that you have?
I run book specials on my books on all my social media almost every week, and they range anywhere from 10 to 30% off. You just have to follow me to be able to catch the really good deals. But I try and make these works very accessible to people. And actually, I am going to be running a Christmas special for the next couple of weeks on classes, and I'll be posting that on all my social media. so people can check that out if they want to take courses through the IBA.
Yeah, so, if you want to enter the world of Dr. Judd Burton, go to burtonbeyond.net, check him out, check out his books and all of his work. There's a lot of stuff in there to look at and listen to. And I know you've been on multiple platforms. Do you want to give a shout out to any other platforms you've been on?
Well, again, just the Blurry Creatures guys would be at the top of the list of giving shout outs. But the guys over at the Ancient Way podcast that I recently did, they do a good job too. There are tons of, including your own program, there are tons of people out there that are digging into this kind of stuff, that are doing a really good job of getting people to take a second look.
Yeah, shout out to Vicky Joy. She's been on my show, and
absolutely,
she's going to graduate with you soon.
She did. She has graduated. Her work is just completely stellar. Actually, Vicky is going to be she's going to be one of my first doctoral students through the Institute.
Well, that's congratulations. That's awesome. Yay,
she's
Vicky.
Fantastic.
Yay. Well, everybody, look to the skies, look to the stars, and if you get scared, read Dr. Burton's work. Don't be afraid. Do you have any other shout outs to your fans you want to make, Dr. Burton?
Oh, always shout outs to my fans. It's so strange to have this kind of celebrity status now. I have the biggest teaching platform that I've ever had in my life, bigger than when you knew me as a history professor. So I love all my fans. I love each and every one of you.
And again, if you want to follow him on all of his platforms. And then again, it's burtonbeyond.net if you want to find him. And thank you so much for being on the show today. And I hope you have a great Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Yes, indeed. Merry Christmas to everybody.
All right, we're going to peace out with some bog metal music for Christmas. Here we go. Let's see, I'll put on the Realm of Shadows. Music by Robert Dumont from the Bog Team.